Listen, if I haven't had the pleasure to meet you, good morning. Would love to get to know you guys after church today. But thank you all for being here. As Pastor Josh shared, we are in a series about the mind where it all begins, right? And, I would love to give you guys a really cool, practical message today, but that's not what God had for us today. This week, this series is going to go on for a couple weeks, right? And so I want to ask you to tell your neighbor, roll with us. Tell your neighbor, roll with us. Roll with us a little bit. See what the Lord has for us. You're going to get the next steps throughout the rest of this month, but today, God got something different for us, okay? Right? So if you could you turn in your Bibles or on your phone or on the screen to Proverbs chapter 23, verses 6 through 8. And while you're turning there, I just have a question. Like, how many of you all here like to host events? You like to have people over the crib. You like to have kickbacks. Just like to gather with your people, right? Have you ever had an event where you were just really looking forward to being with your friends? Not just them people that you hang with sometimes, but them people that you really like to be around, right? Them people that you can actually be your true self around, right? The people that you really don't have to, like, be performative around, right? Just your people, right? Right? So imagine that you are, and some of y'all may have experienced this, imagine that you're having your people over, right? You have curated this perfect guest list. You have planned to cook all these different things, and you cook all these different things that you cook some of your favorite things. You cook things that the guest list likes, right? You've just put all this effort into creating this experience so that you and your friends can have a good time. And so imagine that the day is here. You've done all this preparation, and people start arriving. And as people are arriving, everyone's there. You're just waiting on one person. But when that person that you've been waiting on gets there, imagine that they show up with somebody you wasn't quite expecting. We all been there at least once or twice, right? And so, you say, hey, it's good to see you. Well, really, you don't mean it. You don't mean it, but you just try to be friendly, try to be welcoming, try to be inviting. Like, I didn't know this was happening. They like, hey, listen, it was either I don't come or they come with me. And so this happens, and this person comes in, and when they come in, the night kicks off, right? You guys start enjoying the food. You start having fun. You start playing games. You might even be doing a little karaoke. But after that, the night goes on. You've enjoyed yourselves. You had your food. This person that wasn't invited seems to be taking 2 and 3 trips to the kitchen. Not only was they not invited, but you didn't really want them to partake in the event, and here they are taking advantage of the situation. And after they take advantage of the situation, you just looking at them with a side eye like, you wasn't even, like, what is going on? And after that, the night proceeds, and you're having a good time with your friends, but you just see this person keeps going in your refrigerator, acting like they got refrigerator rights when they wasn't even invited. Right, it's a situation, not a lituation. And so as this is happening, you're like, hey, listen, I'm trying my best to be nice. I'm trying my best to be welcoming. I don't even want you here. But here I am trying to be a good host. I'm just trying to enjoy a night with my friends. And as the night is proceeding, you kind of get over it. But before the night ends, you prepared this special dessert. Let's say it's your favorite carrot cake that all your friends like. You pull it out the fridge, and you serve it out on the table. And everyone that was invited takes a very conservative portion. But this guest that wasn't invited takes the biggest piece. At this point, you done lost it. You just walk away, roll your eyes. You're like, I can't take it anymore. And then the night ends and everyone goes home. Next thing you know, tomorrow you wake up to a text message from your friend that brought the uninvited guest. Hey, had a great time with y'all. It was awesome. But hey, I didn't appreciate the vibes that you were giving to the uninvited guests. You could have been a little bit more friendly. You could have been a little bit more welcoming. You could have been all these different things. And you're like, listen, man, I tried my hardest, but I really didn't want to see this person at all. I don't know what to tell you. You should have just been upfront with me, right? So imagine that there are some situations, and we all been here. All of y'all raised your hands. We all been here. There's situations where we weren't quite expecting something, and we tried our best to get through it, but really our true feelings and emotions came out, right? There are just some things, some feelings that we feel so strongly that we can't hide them, right? And that is what we're talking about in this series, right? We're talking about that there are thoughts and feelings and emotions in our mind that we're processing that we just can't hide. They're beneath the surface, and we do our best to mask them, but some things are just going to come out. Why? Because we're only human. And that is why we need to address these things and work on these things. So if you could you join me in Proverbs 23, 6-8? And it reads, don't eat a stingy person's bread. Don't desire his choice food, for as he thinks when in himself, so he is. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. You will vomit the little you've eaten, and you will waste your pleasant words. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a proverb written by King Solomon. King Solomon is the son of King David, right? King David, the shepherd boy. Solomon was the third king over Israel. He also wrote much of the book of Proverbs. He wrote the book of Song of Solomon. He wrote Ecclesiastes, and he even wrote 2 Psalms. That's his resume. But we also know Solomon for being renowned for his wisdom. He had a lot of wise sayings, many things that we quote in today's culture that we don't even know came from him. But here in this text, Solomon is trying to teach us about how to engage with people and judge their character. That sometimes we are experiencing people in a certain kind of way, but what we see on the surface may not be what is really going on in their hearts towards us or their minds, right? So what Solomon's trying to teach us here is that we ought to take the time to be cautious and discern a person when they're being hospitable towards us or trying to be. Sometimes these people may not be genuine. Sometimes these things may just come off a certain kind of way, but it's oftentimes may not be sincere. Not to oversimplify this proverb, but I want to turn our attention specifically to verse 7, which says, for as he thinks within himself, so he is, right? But I want to say it how we say it in the culture, right? For as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, right? That's the old school version. But what Solomon's trying to teach us here is essentially that a person's thoughts and beliefs shape their character. And as your thoughts and beliefs shape your character, they shape the way that you show up in the world. They shape the way people experience you. They shape the way you come off to people. All these things are driven by our minds and our thoughts and our perceptions. And the idea here is that we need to be mindful. We, the people of God, need to be mindful of our thoughts because the way that we coming off makes a huge difference. Right? It was Pastor Norman Vincent Powell who said, a man is not what he thinks he is, but what he thinks he is. Don't let that go over your head. A man is not what he thinks he is, but what he thinks he is. And what he's trying to say here is that we all have an idea or an image of how we show up in the world. But beyond that idea of how we think we're showing up, right? Beyond our perception of ourselves, beneath the surface, that's not really who we are. Who we are is what we are thinking about. Who we are is what we are consuming. Who we are is what's influencing us. That's exactly who we are. And so today, one of the big ideas that I would love for you all to gather and get is that we need to realize the power of our thoughts. And that if we realize the power of our thoughts, then we ought to be in control of our thoughts. Because if these things are influencing or in charge of how we show up in the world, then we really need to get a handle on it, especially as the people of God. So the title of today's sermon is, Your Thoughts Have Power, but Jesus has more. Your thoughts have power, but Jesus has more. Let's just talk about the power of our thoughts for a second. What is the function of our minds? In the mind, what takes place is thinking, right? In the mind, when we're thinking, we create meaning. We gather and process data. We find patterns and we make comparisons. And the mind is also the place where while we're thinking, we're making decisions. We're making decisions on how we're going to respond to people. We're making decisions on what we're going to wear. We're making all types of decisions all day, which means our minds are constantly moving and working. Not only are we thinking there, but this is also where we monitor our feelings, right? We're assessing positive and negative thoughts. We're assessing positive and negative experiences. We're assessing all these different things and seeing how they're impacting us. Then another thing that happens in the mind is where we process sensations. Right? That's the five senses. We're processing touch. We're processing smell. We're processing taste. We're processing everything. Sight. Everything is happening in our minds. Therefore, our thoughts have power. Now, we keep talking about Happy New Year, right? It's the month of January, right? So it's a new year. And many people like New Year's resolutions. Some people don't really like New Year's resolutions, right? Everybody's different, no judgment, right? Some people like to set monthly goals. But many of us have approached this month of January, right? We like the month of January because it's not only an individual reset, but it's a cultural reset. It's an opportunity for us to start anew, an opportunity to start fresh. And I don't know what people in this room have committed to, but one thing I will say is whatever you're committed to, one thing I've learned, whether it's a new year or a new month or just a new journey, not really at the beginning of a new year or a new month, is it is very difficult to sustain long-term progress towards any goal, be it fitness, career, financial, weight, whatever. It is very hard to sustain long-term progress towards any goal if it's disconnected from your faith. It is very difficult to sustain long-term success because what we tend to do is we tend to engage in what's called behavior modification. We change things for a moment. We change things for a week. We try to address all these habits. There's so many tools and resources and books out there. If you just do this, then you will get what you're looking for. But how many of you here have looked up 1 week, 3 months, 6 months later, and you be back where you started? And that is because behavior modification ain't really the main thing, right? What we're looking for here is transformation, right? The difference is behavior modification says it's all on us, but transformation says we're trusting Jesus. And that's what we need to be thinking about in our minds here is that it's in our minds, is it really on you or are you giving it to Jesus? And that's my question for you today. Who's it on? Craig Rochelle says it like this. He's a pastor of Life Church in Oklahoma. He says, our lives move in the direction of our strongest thoughts, and what we think shapes who we are. And so today I ask you, what are your strongest thoughts? How are your strongest thoughts shaping you? How are they shaping your character? How are they shaping the way you show up in the world? What are they? And how are they manifesting in your daily lives? Last October, the Barna Group, a Christian research organization, conducted a study, and they wanted to see what was the difference or the correlation between a person's faith commitment and living a fulfilling life. And in that study, what they found was, or they developed a certain criteria to people who were actually fulfilled with their life as they go through life in relationship with Jesus. What they first did was they defined 4 components, and they called it being a resilient disciple, right? Because as we know, walking with Jesus ain't always pretty, right? It's not always fun. It ain't always sexy, right? However, being a resilient disciple, they found, was kind of the key to living a fulfilling life. The 4 components they found was this individual typically was someone who regularly attended church and was involved beyond the worship experience. Kicking it to Erica, what she just said, right? This person also is someone who trusts firmly in the authority of the Bible. They also found that these people were committed to Jesus personally, and they affirmed that he was crucified, raised from the dead, conquered sin and death. And the last thing they found was that these people expressed a desire to transform broader society as an outcome of their belief in Jesus. What they found based on surveying hundreds of people, they found that 20% of people fit this criteria of being a resilient disciple. They also found that 17% who consider themselves Christians were habitual churchgoers, and they define that as people who do not necessarily have a foundational core belief in any of those four components of being a resilient disciple. There were different components that they didn't agree with. They also found that there were 63% of people that were considered themselves Christians that had little to no engagement with the church community for 6 months or more throughout the year. And at the end of the study, the biggest finding was that 60% of resilient disciples say that they are highly motivated because they found a way to connect their faith to their daily lives. Could it be that it's within our minds towards our faith and how we're applying it makes the biggest difference to how we experience Jesus on a daily basis? And that is why it's very important that we realize the power of our thoughts. The power of our thoughts, especially as people of God, will impact how we experience life. They will impact how much we trust Jesus in the highs and lows. They will impact all these different things. They will impact really our views. But I don't know about you, but I know that ain't easy. Right? Oftentimes we do experience highs and lows. Oftentimes there are things that we've tried to do in our faith journey and they just didn't work out. And what's that do? It's discouraging. Not only that, we're human, so a lot of things have happened throughout the course of our lives that may even impact our motivation or our views, or some of us have dealt with heavy things like trauma. Some of us have dealt with heavy things like people. Some of us have just been burned. All these things we're carrying with us impact our faith. And what happens when we begin to experience those things? Many of us start wearing a mask. It becomes really hard to show up as our true selves because culturally we want to fit in. Culturally, there's a way we've learned to be in community. Culturally, there's a way we've learned to show up in church. Culturally, I'm not supposed to do this. Many of us continue to show up week after week. We go to church, we go to small group, we do all these different things. We're in community, we serve, and we're trying to be the person that we think we're supposed to be. Realizing that if we show up in all these different spaces and I just push through, I'm going to be all right. But how many of us have been there and we know that even after you keep pushing through, if you keep doing it in your own strength, what do? You end up right back where you started. We try to implement books. We try to implement best practice. We try to listen to podcasts. We try to talk to all these other people. But really beneath the surface, there's something heavy going on. All that starts in our minds and our hearts. Can I tell y'all something? We need transformation. That is because we need transformation, and transformation is not something that we can do on our own. Transformation happens when we give it to Jesus. But when we're walking around carrying this mask, pretending that everything's okay, pretending that we're straight, pretending that life is good all the time, we begin to suffer from what I like to call the Batman versus Bruce Wayne effect. The Batman versus Bruce Wayne effect. What is that? Well, if you don't know the story, let me tell you a little bit about one of my favorite superheroes. Batman, a.k.a. Bruce Wayne, was a little kid. He was at an opera show with his parents one day, and while they were at the opera show, he got a little scared. When he got scared, his dad asked, "Hey, would you like to go home, son?" He said yes. While they're on their way home, they actually ended up exiting the opera, and they end up in a back alley. While they're in the back alley, they get approached by a thief. The thief approached them at gunpoint, and he actually shoots and kills his parents after he robs their jewelry. After this, Bruce began to go down a very dark path. He began to carry the weight of his parents' death. He began to own the fact that their death was his fault. If only I had just pushed through and stayed at the opera show, my parents would have lived. Bruce began to take on all these different complexes of guilt and shame and a high sense of responsibility for what had happened to his parents. And he spent the rest of his childhood carrying this. So much so that as he carried this, he began to develop a sense of responsibility that he had to play the hero. After he develops this hero complex, he begins, I forgot to mention to y'all that this dude was a billionaire. He grew up in one of the richest families in Gotham. So we have this young man who is one of the richest young men. Let's say let's fast forward to his 20s now. He's rich, but he's still carrying all these heavy things. He's showing up the world carrying all this pain that goes unaddressed for years. How many of y'all have been there where you're just carrying all these unaddressed emotions and experiences, trauma, heavy things, but we still put the mask on every day? We show up at work, we show up at church, we show up at functions, pretending to be okay when really there's some heavy things going on that need to be addressed. Now, Gotham City was much like Baltimore. Lots of crime, lots of killing. There was things going on all the time, and Bruce, deeply moved, deeply motivated by the death of his parents, feeling a sense of responsibility, felt like he had to do something. So what does he do? He uses his resources to develop this costume, this uniform, and that's when Batman was born. He felt like he had to play the hero to the city of Gotham because he couldn't play the hero in his parents' situation. He had believed some core lies, and he carried them throughout his life, and they impacted him in such a way that he felt like he had to be somebody he wasn't to make a difference. He felt like he had to carry the weight and take on the situation himself and to be the solution. Can I tell y'all something? All that was a lie. He didn't have to become the solution. We're talking about a billionaire. If we take a step back, if you're a billionaire in a city, one of the best things you can do is use your money, your access and proximity to power, use resources to address some of the deeply rooted issues to resolve systemic issues that had gone on for years. That is what the best thing that he could have done is, maybe if he was in a healthy space, maybe if he had the right community, maybe if the right people were in his ear, maybe if he was healthily processing through what he was going through. Maybe if he would just be honest about what he was saying and feeling, seeing and feeling. I think many times we do the same thing. We suffer from the Batman versus Bruce Wayne effect. We feel like we got to play the hero in our story. We take responsibility for things that happen to us that we carry in our lives, and we feel like we got to fix it. That is why we buy so many self-help books. That is why we listen to so many podcasts. That is why we show up daily and weekly in every area of our life wearing a mask. We feel like that's what's going to solve our problems. But can I tell y'all something? All it does is land us right back where we started. And it's very discouraging. I know because I've been there. But I have a question. As a believer, here's some of the 7 most common things that keep us, or the mindsets that keep us stagnant in our faith. Right? We're talking about people who start and stop, or you just want more for your faith journey. What are those things that hold you back, right? While we're wearing this mask, while we're carrying this mask, there are 7 things that tend to hold Christians back, 7 mindsets. The first thing is legalism, right? That's when you just always focused on being judgmental. Hey, this shouldn't be this way. This shouldn't be that way. According to the Bible, this and that. And it's just not, it's not helping you. And it's not helping the people around you. In fact, nobody wants to talk to you. Right? The second thing that holds us back or keeps us from growing is pride. It's when we're arrogant. It's when nobody can tell you anything. You think you know everything, right? And that just prevents you from just experiencing the grace of God. The next thing is doubt. Many of us don't believe in some component of why we're here. Maybe we don't trust God. Maybe we don't believe he can change our situation. Maybe we don't really believe that he is who he said he is. Or maybe there's something fundamental in our faith that we just have cast to the side. Another thing that holds us back is unforgiveness. Many of us are harboring bitterness, and this is keeping us from growing and experiencing the love of Jesus in our lives. Maybe it's worldly distractions. Maybe it's what you consume. Maybe it's who you're around. All these different things, they hold you back. For some of us, it's fear. We're scared to take a next step. We're scared to address some of the heavy things that we're carrying. We're scared. And another thing is complacency. We've just taken it for granted. Statistically, these are the 7 things that hold believers back from growing in their faith. But all these things go back to our minds. And again, we're admitting that our thoughts have power, right? And that can also be known as a core lie, or what we like to call in the kingdom, a stronghold. That is something in your life that is holding you back, and it just has a hold on you. And it won't let you go. Let me tell y'all something. You can't get rid of a stronghold in your own strength. You can't. This is something that is spiritual and it's on you, and you don't have the power to defeat it. But I'll tell you who does, Jesus. Right? So it's kind of like bamboo. Anyone ever dealt with bamboo? I'll tell y'all something. At 4112 Fairfax Street, Landover Hills, Maryland. Let me tell y'all something. It was vicious. If you look on the screen, you'll see bamboo, right? What bamboo does is it sets up a rooting system 3 feet beneath the surface of the ground. And after it sets up a rooting system, it takes 6 to 8 years to spread. And after that 6 to 8 years, that's when it starts sprouting. Think about that for a second. This thing is setting up a rooting system for 6 to 8 years beneath the surface, and you can't see it. It don't sprout at all. But at the end of that, once it's done setting its footing, it begins to pop up 3 to 6 inches on a daily basis. And you can cut it at the bottom of the stalk, but let me tell you something. That joint will be right back next week. That's how it is for a lot of the heavy stuff that we're carrying in our lives. Many of us try to address the deeply rooted issues in our lives by prayer or just saying, hey, it's going to be okay, or we try to push through, or many of us don't even address it. We just put on a mask and say, it is what it is. Let me tell you something. That is no way to go through life, and that is not Jesus' desire for you. In fact, the scripture says that in John 10:10 that the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus comes that you might have life. And let me tell y'all something. I don't know what you're carrying. I don't know what you're trying to do. I don't know what you want for yourself or for your life. But let me tell you something. All that starts in our minds. And these are tricks that the enemy has been playing on the people of God for years. It started in the book of Genesis chapter 3. We see that Satan came up to Eve and he said, did God really tell you not to eat from this tree? He had her thinking that what God told her wasn't true. He got in her mind. And that's the same thing he's been doing to me and you. He gets in our minds. He tells us that our situation is never going to change. He tells us I'm never going to grow spiritually. He tells us you'll never get out of whatever it is. You'll never overcome what you're seeing. All of this is manifested in our mind and is deeply rooted, just like the bamboo. It set it up a rooted system in your life, and it started maybe when you were a childhood. And maybe it continues to just be fed and grown, and every experience negative just continues to add to it. And you just, before you know it, you got this heavy load on you. And when we're carrying a heavy load and we don't know how to face it, what do? We mask up. And after we mask up, we just get so comfortable and so used to carrying the mask. But let me tell y'all something. That was never his desire for you. He never desired for you to carry these things on your own. And that's even the trick of the enemy, is that it's on you. We got to let go of the Batman versus Bruce Wayne effect. What if you took off the mask? What if you took an opportunity to expose what you're carrying? What if you took a moment to just let it go? Let me tell you something. I got my own mask off story, right? Many years ago, not that many, but a while ago, there was just this season in my life where I really wanted to go spiritually. And I was doing all the things. I was going to church. I was in small groups. I was hanging out with people that love Jesus, you know. But let me tell you something. They wasn't my closest friends. And I was wondering for years why I wasn't growing. And remember, I just shared with y'all the 7 things that hold us back. One of the things on there was pride, and the other thing was worldly distractions. I had so much pride about making changes in my life. It was my mindset and my refusal to let go of certain people, places, and things that held me back spiritually. I wanted to prove that I could make it doing things my way, my plan. But for real, I was like, dang, like, why I'm not growing? Why do I seem to still be in the same situation? Why is nothing changing in my life? I was wondering all these things, asking all these questions when it was right in front of me. You know what had to happen? I had to humble myself. I had to take off the mask. I had to be okay with exposing that which was holding me back. You know, you ever cut yourself and have a wound and you put a Band-Aid on it because sometimes that's just what we think we're supposed to do? But you know, sometimes things heal better if we rip the Band-Aid off and we expose it. God cannot support you in getting out of your situation if you refuse to take off the mask and refuse to expose that which you're carrying. So I don't know what your goals are for your life. I don't know what you want to get out of your spiritual journey, but I tell you what, he don't desire for you to be stuck. He don't desire for you to stay where you are. In fact, in Galatians 5:1, he says, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Even earlier today, we were saying, who the Son sets free is free indeed. And I got one question for y'all. Do you want to be free? And if your answer is yes, then I believe that Jesus has something to share with you. In the book of John chapter 11, we see the story of Lazarus, Jesus' uncle. And Jesus is doing his thing, right? But word gets to him that, hey, Lazarus, your uncle, he is sick. While Lazarus is sick, Jesus actually doesn't head to him right away. He waits 2 days. And while Jesus is doing his thing, waiting, he tells his disciples, hey, I think we might need to head to Judea. And they're like, ho, wait a second. Didn't they just try to kill you a couple weeks ago? This is the beginning of the journey of Jesus trying to do something. In fact, Jesus said that this sickness will not end in death. And so I don't know what you're carrying, but Jesus doesn't intend for your situation to stay the way it is. In fact, he desires to change your situation. He wants to change your situation. He wants to show you exactly who he is. And so while this is happening, Jesus says, Lazarus is sick. In fact, he may be dead, but our friend Lazarus is asleep. But in fact, I intend to wake him up. Jesus wants to wake you up. He wants to shake you out of whatever situation you're holding on to, and he wants you to be free. Take off the mask. Stop carrying what you're carrying on your own and allow Jesus to do what only he can do. If we would go on in the scriptures, it actually ends up being an exchange between Jesus and Mary. And while they're communicating, Jesus says, hey, do you believe that I have the power? And she says, yes, I believe that you are the resurrection and life. I believe that you have all power in your hands. And so my question to you today is, do you believe that Jesus can do it? Do you believe that Jesus can change the situation? Do you believe that there is actually a day where you're not carrying what you're carrying? Showing up wearing a mask, pretending that everything's okay, trying to solve everything with self-help books and podcasts and all these other things. Do you believe that there is another side? And if you do, know that Jesus is the answer. If we fast forward through the text and land at verse 39, Jesus shows up and he tells them to remove the stone. I'm asking you today, are you willing to remove the stone? Are you willing to let go of whatever it is you've been carrying and hiding and suppressing? Are you willing to expose that which is holding you back in the mind? Whatever mindset it is. And maybe it's the fact that it's all on you. But let me tell you today, that's not Jesus' intent. Jesus is asking you to remove whatever it is and to let it go. Oftentimes, the first thing we can do with our mindset is number one, realize we've got one. But the next thing is we got to let it go. Transformation is not our responsibility. That's Jesus's. We got to give him the space and the opportunity to do what only he can do in our lives. And so that's my thing to you. You got to let it go. The second thing comes in verse 40 where he says, did I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? And today I ask you, are you prepared to see the glory of God? If you are, then believe. And James, you can come forward. If you believe, then it's time for you to truly say that, Lord, I'm giving it to you. The scripture says in Psalm 139 that if we create space for God to search us and to know our hearts and to test us and to know our concerns, that he would lead us. But that doesn't happen until we let go and give it to him. And so I ask you today, are you ready to let it go? Are you ready to stop wearing the mask and carrying the same situation you've been carrying? Because if that's you, then know that Jesus has the power to change your situation. If only you would believe. Mary called on Jesus because she knew that she could change the situation. She knew that if she called on Jesus, that Lazarus might get up. And she told him, listen, I know exactly who you are. I know you're the Messiah. I know you're the Son of God. I know you're the resurrection of life. And today I ask you, do you know that? And if that's true for you, then I'm asking you to live like it. Just like we ended the huddle today. Jesus is asking us, do you believe? You can come on up, worship team.
You're in.
I don't know where you are. I don't know what you've been thinking about. I don't know how you've been processing through this message or this series. And I asked you at the beginning of the series to roll with us. But today, what I'm saying is, if you're looking for a change in your mindset, if you're ready to stop starting and stopping, starting and stopping and starting over and wearing this mask and carrying all these things on your own, then this is an opportunity for you to invite Jesus in. All he's asking for you to do today is to remove the stone and let it go.